I've worked as a correctional officer for a very long time. I've worked at facilities in Texas and in Michigan. The oldest prison I've ever worked at just recently started to close in Michigan. And it got me thinking about all the paranormal experiences I've had there and in other prisons I've worked at. I'd like to share with all of you some of the more notable paranormal experiences that I've had while working in these prisons. First off, I'd like to say that I never really believed in ghosts before I started working as a correctional officer. I started off working in Texas at an intake facility. I worked night shifts 12 hours from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. The first experience that I ever had was working on a lower security housing unit. When finishing a round, I was chatting with my partner and I heard a loud banging sound. It was around 3 a.m. at this point. No prisoners should be out of their bunks. I asked my partner if they knew what that banging was. Them being an older officer told me bluntly that the unit we were working on was haunted as hell. They told me the sound was coming from a door on one of the small quiet cells in a hallway that wasn't directly visible from the officer station. He also stated that a prisoner had died in that one. Allegedly, the prisoner had been given a sack full of food, choked, and then died. I really didn't believe that the unit was haunted, so I decided to go look for myself. The volume increased as I got closer to the door, and the door itself was visibly shaking as if someone was pounding on it. There's nothing that could have been causing the door to shake like it was, and I was at a complete loss for words. Later that night when I checked the door again, there's a steamed up handprint visible on the glass of the door window. Another experience I had was at the same facility, but at a different housing unit. It was around 1 to 2 a.m. I was sitting inside the officer station watching the cameras and talking to my partner. I look at one of the cameras and clearly see a prisoner sitting at a table in the day room. I turn my head to look at the day room and no one is sitting at the table I just saw on camera. I asked my partner to go check it out because no one is supposed to be out of bed. I roll back the time on the camera to see if I could see where the prisoner might have gone. The prisoner on the camera literally slowly fades away and vanishes completely. My partner comes back into the officer station and we both watch this video over and over. Later on that same night, during one of my rounds, I noticed a wet floor sign that got left out, so I returned it to the proper closet. When I get back to the officer station and look back to where the closet is and see the same wet floor sign left out once more. I asked my partner if they're playing some kind of joke on me or something because I just put that sign away. He denies doing anything with it. So once more, I go back out and make sure I put the sign back in the closet and lock the door. I get back to the officer station. Wet floor sign right there in the open again. Now my partner and I are both watching it. It starts to tip over very slowly on one end. Then two of its legs off the ground. The sign itself then slams to the ground. Then proceeds to slide quickly up the hallway and then back to in front of the closet door before ceasing all movement. My partner and I refused to come out of the officer station for the rest of the night because we were scared shitless. One more notable thing from Texas. I was working in an ADSEG unit, really high security unit for prisoners that get in fights and cause a lot of problems repeatedly. We had a prisoner who was sitting in one of our close observation cells. These cells are used for people who threaten to harm themselves. In the summertime, prisoners will usually just say they are suicidal to be put in one of these cells because it's a lot cooler and near the AC vents that our normal housing units just don't have. The prisoner told me that this was what they were doing and they didn't want to cause any problems. Later on that night, one of my partners and I were watching the cameras. All of a sudden, we see a shadow moving across the floor. Eventually it comes to the close observation cell and then disappears under the door. And this is where it gets a little crazy. I do a round check, and on the close observation cell, that same prisoner is pacing inside. I ask if they're okay, and they tell me that something just doesn't feel right. You're hearing voices that just aren't there. I try to calm them down, and eventually they do, and lie back on their bed. Later on, my partner calls for assistance, because that same prisoner had bitten to his skin of their own wrist, causing them to bleed, and then held them above their head and allegedly was speaking in tongues. When I started working at the prisons in Michigan, I worked at a prison that's now closing, but it was built back in 1877 and is one of the oldest prisons still operating in all of the United States. There were so many small experiences that I've had here. Doors would slam, you'd hear voices, cold chills. The first really notable experience I had was around Christmas time on third shift. I was working the oldest unit on the facility. Usually we don't have prisoners there, but we had opened up the unit to separate prisoners during the COVID pandemic. I didn't have a partner due to how short-staffed we were, so one of the other officers set up a TV for me to keep me entertained, because I'd be really far away from all the other units and get bored with no one to talk to. I do rounds for most of the night, watching TV in between. I suddenly hear a banging noise from a door that leads to a hallway that takes you all the way to an even older unused condemned part of the prison. I open up the door, take a look down the hallway. Immediately a cold breeze hits me. Suddenly my arm hairs stand on end. I close the door, thoroughly creeped out. I go and sit down and start watching TV again. TV starts flipping through channels rapidly, then stops on static. I get moved to a different unit because I'm scared shitless once more. One day on third shift, my friend and I were working positions that allowed us to have a lot of free time, with no prisoners to watch. We decided to explore the prison. We explored the tunnels that went underneath, the old barns, and the old unstaffed gun towers. We decided to go look at the old condemned part of the prison from my earlier experience. There was a big metal gate that was about halfway down the hallway that had to be opened by a big skeleton key. We get back to the old condemned part. My friend tells me about how this part was supposed to be the old segregation. We used flashlights because this part was so old it no longer even had power. The energy back there is something I won't ever forget. A feeling of dread. I ask my friend and we start to head back. As we headed down the hallway to where the gate was, my friend's flashlight suddenly dies. We continue our way down and can't see anything in almost pitch black. We hear something running after us, so we start running up the hallway too. My friend fumbles with the keys as we hear it getting closer. We get the gate open and sprint out of there. Later on, we noticed that my friend had red claw marks all over his arm. That's all I have for you, and I really hope you enjoyed reading about all my experiences.
Burns into My Memory by Invisible Socks. So I have to tell my own story I have held for all these years. I am 46 years old and this event happened when I was around 5 or 6. My parents at the time left me at my grandmother's house during the day, presumably for childcare, and I have very few memories of that time. The few things that do stick out are walks to the park across the street in Fullerton, California, and home-cooked meals. I always like to climb this tree outside as well. But more importantly, I want to point out that I have a few memories from that time in my life. This is one I'm about to tell you that stayed and etched into my memory the most. I remember it was broad daylight, probably about 10 a.m. or so. I was eating cereal in my grandmother's kitchen. She used to talk on the phone all the time with her friends or whoever, so she would have to pay attention to me. That morning she was deep in conversation with a friend and I noticed something in my side vision that was outside. The best way I can describe it is it was like when you see men at hockey games that wear those green bodysuit things that completely cover their face and everything. So you see an outline of a man. However, this man I saw was unlike most of the other accounts of shadow people. It had no features on his face, if it was even male. No nose, no mouth, just a head that was all black. This was in the middle of the day, like I said. I couldn't see any shadows or anything, just the black figure. He was walking on the side of the house and walking slowly, almost like he was in slow motion. I was scared and frozen. He walked right up to the window and almost looked like he was going to walk right through it. He started looking in, and looking back on it now, my adult brain is trying to make sense of it. Like it was just a guy who was robbing people wearing a balaclava. But the figure had no features whatsoever. What made this more frightening is that he had no shadow as well. He just seemed to slip by, and once he got to the concrete block fence wall thing that are so common in Southern California, he vanished. I have heard in the past that sometimes kids and young people are more attuned to seeing paranormal things. I have been a lifelong skeptic. I still cannot explain this, and like I said, it has stuck in my head for all of these years. I just wanted to share this with the community. I feel so much better telling someone. I told my son earlier when we were driving and when we were listening to Art Bell archives in the car. Listening to that really brought back a flood of memories from that encounter. I still cannot explain it.
The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, formerly known as the Weston State Hospital. It's a Kirkbride building that housed the mentally ill from 1864 to 1994. In 2007, it was privately purchased and has now become a museum and historic location for ghost hunting. It has a most unpleasant and dark history that I've regaled to thousands of people, and it pains me to be an expert on this subject. In 2021, I retired from my position as a guide and ghost hunt event manager, under severe burnout. After all that I experienced there, it solidified in my mind that paranormal things that defy rational explanation do indeed happen, and certain phenomenon are absolutely real, EVPs especially. It's almost October and I'm feeling a little spooky, so here are a couple strange things that I've experienced in my time there. One evening while training on the job, I was on the first floor with a couple of coworkers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were just kind of killing time and quietly observing. Light from the outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. In that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to hip walk through that light from left to right. I said something about it, and the three of us watched as an arm and a hand moved into the light from the right side. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out that window for someone. There was no one. At that time, the realization from the ground to the bottom of that window is like 7 feet, and it didn't even occur to me. I will never forget the crisp, clean silhouette shape for as long as I live. We would run experiments with spirit boxes. If you don't know what a spirit box is, it rapidly scans radio frequencies and are believed to communicate through the device. One person would use one with noise-canceling earbuds, so all they're able to hear is the radio static and the blips of a few radio stations. When they hear a word or a phrase, they are to say it out loud. One evening, my coworker and I ran one of these experiments in a notorious room where a murder took place in 1987. For 10 minutes I sat and listened to nothing but radio static through the spirit box. No blips of radio, nothing except the ch-ch-ch-ch-ch of the static. I was starting to get bored when I heard a woman's voice say, "Evil." So I spoke up and repeated the word evil. Next thing I know, my coworker is shining her flashlight in my face to get my attention. I pull out the earbud and she was practically and frantically saying, "It's time to go, it's time to go." So we haul ass out of the room, down the hallway and into the next hall of the center section, before she would even tell me what had happened. While I was hearing nothing but static, she said she kept hearing what sounded like someone shuffling their feet and walking around just outside the door. She said she spoke up and asked, "Whoever is out in the hallway, are they nice?" And that was when I spoke out and said, "Evil." In the wee hours one night, we figured it would be cool to see what happened if we shut all the doors of the ward. One of the doors, as I was closing it, the knob twisted in my hand and was forcibly pulled closed. I stood there shocked for a few moments, opening and closing that door, trying to replicate what just happened, trying to explain it to myself. Finally, the person with me was like, "What the hell are you doing?" It was so weird. I had never felt invisible force like that before. I had 3 people spend the night one night, and they had thermal imaging video. They set it up, pointing down the hallway where we could all watch on a tablet. We thought it would be interesting to leave a device at the far end of the hall that would alarm if the field around it was disturbed. As one of the dudes walked down the hall to put it there, we could see his form on the thermal imaging, clearly human-shaped in colors representing heat and warmth. When he walked by one of those doors about a quarter of the way down, the shape of a head, neck, shoulders, and upper body of a person, in colors indicating cooler temperatures, leaned and peeked out as he walked by, like someone popped out of the room for a second as he walked by to check him out. I've never seen anything like it and won't forget it, and I would give my left testicle, if I had one, for a copy of that footage. That happened a lot, the guest capturing something far out and not sending a copy to us. I'll end this long-winded Reddit post with something that absolutely changed me and still don't quite understand. I remember the exact night and time of these occurrences. That's how profound and somewhat unsettling they were. June 3rd and June 4th of 2017, 3:40 a.m. After an hour or so of hearing a female's voice, and one instance even sounded like she was saying my name, as well as hearing them banging around, footsteps, and literal running sounds on that hardwood floor right towards us. I sat quietly on the floor with the group. I started to feel dizzy, lightheaded, and gross. Told myself it was my imagination and that I'd be fine. A few moments later, I started to feel this intense burning sensation on my lower back, just to the right of my spine. Again, I told myself it was all just in my imagination. That burning sensation kept amping up, getting worse and worse. Told myself that I didn't want to be that guy and say anything in front of these people, you know? Finally, it got to the point where I had to say something. I asked my coworker with us if there was anything there, and she was like, "Oh my God, there on my lower back." Just to the right of my spine was a mark that looked like a burn or abrasion, about 3 to 4 inches long and about 1 inch wide. Now, I've seen other claims made by visitors of being scratched, and often just writing them off, because the marks were always gone within an hour at most. But I had visible marking on my back for almost a week. My nerves there and to this day often feel very weird, sometimes chilled, sometimes like a skin soreness, especially when I think back on this experience. June 4th, same part of the building and same time of night. I noticed that my voice recorder ran out of memory, so I'm holding it in my right hand, using the flashlight in my left so I could see what I was doing. Suddenly I feel a burning sensation on the right underside of my right forearm. Like I did a WTF and shifted my flashlight to it. The person beside me and I watched as 3 welts began to appear down my arm. Needless to say, that shit blew my mind. It is the one thing to see marks like that, but it's a whole nother thing to watch it as it appears on your skin. Like the majority of instances I've heard about, those marks were gone within 10 to 15 minutes. No lasting effects. Scared would be the wrong word, but I have none to describe my mind frame around those events. I took a week off from work to just try process it all, and I was nervous being in that hallway for the rest of the summer. Like I said, I still don't know what to think or what to believe. I've gotten enough stories of experiences to probably fill a book, but I'll leave you with those for now. I will add a final note about how constantly poking around in the dark and talking about past true horrors of human experiences, day in and day out, truly will take a toll, spiritually and emotionally. Since my resignation, my mental health and all-over wellness and happiness has greatly improved. I used to tell people for a while afterwards that it felt like I'd gotten out of a toxic relationship with that place.
Chasing in a Maze by otherwise add 1747. A few years ago, I entered the University of Lausanne to enter my medical studies. I had just arrived in the city and even in the country. I was very excited to start my year, to discover the university, to meet new people, etc. Everything was going great until the end of the 3rd week. Friday, sometime around 9 p.m., I leave the library. I say goodbye to my friends and start to go home. The pace of work was already very intense, so we had been working all day and I was in a rush to get home. It was my favorite part of the day because I got to put on my music, take the subway, and then the train. It gives me a chance to rest and catch up with my thoughts. Anyway, that night it was so cold, there was no one left outside. It takes me about 7 minutes to walk from the library to the subway. I'm walking quietly with my music in my ears when suddenly I get a shiver that runs down my body from head to toe. I start to feel comfortable as if someone was watching me. And at that point, I pause my music and decide to not turn around to check in case the person is trying to be inconspicuous, and if I notice them, I was fearful that something might happen. I don't want to run either because I'm not sure if I can run faster, and I don't know exactly where to go. At this point, we pass a glass building, so I decide to look inside and pretend I'm fixing my hair. I quickly glance in the corner of my eye and my blood runs cold. There is someone walking a few feet behind me in a hoodie. I try to reassure myself that he was just finishing work and going home, and that he is cold and that is why he is wearing his hoodie, and there are no houses for civilians for quite some time. I decide to send a message to my mother saying, "Come and get me in front of the insert name of the building, please. I really don't feel safe." It is important to know that the university is 30 minutes away by car from my house. At this point, I don't find another solution and I decide to take refuge in a building while waiting for my mother to come and get me. As I was about to go back, I opened the door, took off my helmet, and went down the stairs to find a hiding place. We entered by the 3rd floor. I thought I was out of trouble when suddenly I hear the door I came through open. This time I am sure he is after me, but since I'm new, I don't know this building and where it leads. I run downstairs at full speed and I hear him behind me. I can hear this guy's footsteps running down the stairs at full speed as well. I run without looking back, being sure that he is running faster than I can, and that he will catch up with me. I don't even know where I'm going, but I pray that I don't fall into a dead end. Looking back, I even think that it was like that scene in The Shining with the labyrinth. I don't know how far ahead of him I was, so I opened a window in the hallway to make it look like I was out of there, and opened a little door further. It was a huge auditorium and it was pitch dark. I went down the stairs and hid under a desk. I put my phone on silent and did my best to hide. My mom had been texting me a lot asking me what was going on and saying she was on her way with my dad. I texted her, "I'm in insert name of building. He is looking for me, please come quickly." I hid under the desk thinking I was screwed. My hiding place sucked and he was going to find me any second. Then, I heard a thud and a huge scream, and I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life when I heard that scream. For 15 minutes my mother was sending me messages telling me to hang on, and at the end of those 15 long minutes waiting for him to find me, I finally got the message from my mom saying that she's here, and she has the police. They are going to enter the building and they need to know where I am. I just tell them I'm on the 2nd floor because I had no idea where I was, and after 2 minutes I heard the door of the auditorium open and it was the police coming after me. Once I got out, they took my statement and they said they would check out the university management. The next day they contacted us and said that they saw on the surveillance cameras that there was indeed someone who had followed me. Apparently, there were no cameras inside that particular building though. You can't see the guy's face and therefore, we don't know who it is. They just sadly said that the security was going to do patrols at night and advised me to do something. They just said that security was going to do patrols at night and advised me to have someone with me when I'm out.
My strangest, most unexplained experiences maybe could be explained, but I don't know. In our home, there were 2 unlit candles for decoration, standing on top of an old box TV with a wide, flat surface. They were covered in dust because they were never used and just stood there and weren't really cleaned. We're chatting in the living room with a bunch of guests. It was some sort of birthday party or get-together, when suddenly, one of the candles, which was placed far from the edge, drags itself across the surface and falls down. Everyone heard, and I sat right by the TV and saw it. We all had a what the heck moment, and we didn't know what happened. We just picked it up and put it back. As strange as it was also normal for doors to open and close on their own, as well as hearing weird noises and footsteps. My aunt came over once. She used to be a healer and some sort of medium, and told us there was a ghost. She explained that there were new people living here, and he needed to leave. After that, there was nothing, until my grandpa passed away. One night at around 2 or 3 a.m., when I was about to sleep, I heard a Christmas music box playing right outside my door. Everyone was asleep except me. Their bedrooms are upstairs, while mine is downstairs. It played a few notes, really loud, and stopped. Kinda like when you wind up a music box, and it sorta has little hiccups, or what do you call them? But anyway, it stopped for like a few minutes, and then suddenly played again. Except this time, it played for 3 to 5 minutes straight, with no breaks or hiccups. When it finally stopped, I dared to look outside the door, against my better judgment, and saw nothing. When I looked again, a little later, I found the music box on top of the shelf, next to my door, out of my reach. I'm short. Just sitting in the corner. Felt like I was in a horror movie. The weird shadow man I saw approaching me in my bedroom while I was terrified in my bed and couldn't move much. Sleep paralysis hallucination, probably, but creepy. One moment it was there, watching me, and the next, it was gone. The house that I grew up in had a spirit of some kind residing in it. I thought it would be fun to reminisce on my past experiences, so I'll go in chronological order. My grandpa lived in the house before my parents and I, and died in the house. We moved into the home, which is quite old, a few months after he passed. I was around 5 years old at the time. I have a very clear memory of walking into the kitchen and my deceased grandpa pouring me a glass of soda with a wink and a "don't tell your mom." Now, I would think that was just a memory I had with my grandpa while he was still alive. But I remember walking into the kitchen with a glass of soda and the look of shock on my mom's face. She kept it in a place where I couldn't possibly reach it and turned pale white when I informed her Grandpa had given it to me. This next one is probably the only scary experience I've ever had in the home. And I don't actually believe it was the spirit that was normally in the home because of the uncharacteristic violence it displayed. Around the time this occurred, my older brother started a goth phase. He was extremely interested in Satanists and brought a Ouija board into our home. I was probably around 10 or 11, around the time that this occurred. I was sitting in my room playing my Nintendo DS when I got the distinct feeling that I was being watched. I felt drawn to this particular corner of the room for some reason, and I felt almost in a trance-like state. Suddenly, behind me, I felt something that appeared to be quite large, breathing its hot breath on me. I immediately turned to leave my room and broke into a run as soon as I hit the stairs. I heard this loud screech that was unlike any other sound I've ever heard, followed by a loud crash. My dad was downstairs in the living room and hadn't heard a thing. I couldn't fall asleep in my room for weeks after that, and I firmly believe that this encounter was with a demon. Probably a year or so following this incident, I had another encounter with a spirit. At this point in time, my fraternal grandfather had moved in with us due to health difficulties. A friend of mine was spending the night, and we sat on the bed chatting, waiting for my grandfather to go to sleep in the bedroom across from mine, so that we could go to the living room and watch TV. At the angle my bed was, you could see the wall by the stairs, but not the stairs themselves. We heard heavy, obvious footsteps climb the staircase and saw someone's shadow move along the wall. When whoever it was reached the top of the stairs, it appeared to stop, looking in the direction of my room for a brief moment. Then it continued on into the bedroom across the hall, with my friend and I both hearing the door open and shut. Of course, we assumed it was my grandfather at this point, so we walked downstairs to watch some South Park. We stopped dead in our tracks when we saw my grandfather sitting in the chair, watching the news. My parents had already gone to bed, and no one ever came back out of the bedroom. So either someone had broken into our house and hid in my grandfather's closet all night, or my friend and I encountered something else that night. Shortly after this, my mom had a priest come and bless the house after my friend and I told her about the experience, just to be safe, in addition to installing a security system. I'm in my 20s now, and I no longer live at home. But even in my adult years, I've had a few experiences. The most frequent occurrence being when I sometimes am sitting home alone in the living room. I'll hear the kitchen door open clear as day and hear footsteps going up the stairs. Of course, every time I go to investigate, nothing's ever there. I also hear whispering coming from my brother's old room from time to time, as do my parents. I actually found out somewhat recently that they would hear things that they couldn't explain sometimes, whispering, footsteps, but never mentioned it to me as a child so that I wouldn't be scared. My most recent encounter happened a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's really cute personally. I was in the kitchen making one of those whipped coffees, and I had my hair up in a high ponytail. While I was using the very loud hand mixer, I felt someone come behind me and playfully kind of slap my ponytail. I turned around thinking it was my mom, but no one was there. Ironically, this was the exact same spot where nearly 15 years ago, my grandpa had poured me that soda. On this particular day, I'd been working on this very stressful essay that would determine where and if I'd get into a graduate program. I like to think that it was just my grandpa letting me know that he was around and that it'll be okay. While I did have a scary experience once in the home, I don't believe it was the same entity that I've encountered on other occasions. Unfortunately, I think at one time my idiot brother had probably invited a not-so-kind spirit into the home. However, I think all of my other experiences were either my grandpa or a deceased owner who was just hanging around.
I was once working as a receptionist at a 5-star resort that's about 45 minutes away from the city center. Everyone who has worked in tourism and/or hospitality knows that there are certain periods during the year where it's busier than usual, i.e. peak season. This incident happened during peak season. The resort was well overbooked and guests were checking into the rooms one after another at the reception counter. I was almost done checking in this nice lovely couple when I saw this family of 5 standing behind them and tried to finish up the whole check-in process so I could assist the family that was next in line. Now you must be thinking, when I said family of 5, it's the parents and 3 kids, right? But it's actually 2 kids and 1 elderly woman, who at the time I assumed was either the husband's or wife's mother. Now the resort's policy was to get the details of every single guest, and it's for good reason, safety. It's for the same reasons that the airlines do it. They obtain their passengers' info. So I told the husband that we needed everyone's details and he said sure, no problem. And of course, I was expecting 5 names on the registration form. By the time I realized there were only 4 names, the family were already at the concierge area to pick up their luggage and go to their room. I couldn't quite go after them as I was assisting another guest. Like I said, it was peak season, so all I could do was watch them from afar, walking towards the elevator and then disappearing from sight. The whole time they were walking, the old woman just followed them from behind, quietly, but I didn't give it much thought and went right back to assisting the guest that was in front of me. After the buzz died down around 4 p.m., I decided to ring the family's room to inform them that they were missing some details. The husband came down to the reception alone, and I told him that I needed the info of his or his wife's mother's info. This man just stood there and stared at me for what felt like a minute and then said, "It's only my wife and I and our 2 kids." Me being just as confused said, "But sir, I saw there were 5 of you." At this point, I thought he was lying to avoid paying for the 3rd person charge for one of the rooms. They got 2 rooms and 1 room has enough amenities for 2 person. The same goes for the buffet breakfast that's included. He took another minute and asked me exactly what did this elderly woman look like. I explained that she had gray hair and was short, like bob haircut, also telling him that she was wearing this red shirt. And right as I told him that, he quickly took out his phone, frantically scrolled for a few seconds, and then showed me a picture of the same woman in the same clothes lying in a closed coffin that had a clear glass cover. I nodded slightly and he said it's his mother. She died unexpectedly a few months ago. I was to no surprise too shocked to say anything at this point, but somehow managed to mutter the words, I'm so sorry for your loss, sir, and I'm sorry about all this. He just said it was okay, gave me a small smile, then left without saying anything else. When they checked out 2 days later, we pretended like that whole thing never happened, and lucky enough, that elderly woman was not there with them. I still get goosebumps today just thinking about this. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. What up? Thank you for joining me, thank you for listening, and thank you for being you. You know, just thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Amanda Jane and SwampDweller, both of whom are fucking dope, both of whom are amazing. Both of whom are amazing, and I don't feel like editing anymore, so all of these fuck-ups you're just gonna have to listen to and me being an idiot, it's just what you get, man. It's part of it. It's part of what you signed up for. It's part of the deal. Hope you're cool with that. Hope you like it. Hope you love it. Hope you enjoy it. Live, love, laugh, you know? Just look over to your left right now where you're sitting. Look at that big wooden rustic live, love, laugh sign that you have hanging right there, and just give it a head nod and thank it. Appreciate it. Alright, I'm gonna stop rambling on and being an idiot now and close this episode, because I think 98% of you stopped listening a long time ago. And I don't blame you. Don't blame you one bit. I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh yeah, the next episode? Nice. Big, thick, with 4 C's. Halloween compilation coming on Monday or Tuesday. No wait, Monday or Sunday or Monday. Can't see it, but I'm doing the finger guns right now. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.